This happened to me about a decade ago, during my senior year of high school. At the time, I lived with my family in a fading blue-collar suburb just outside of Pittsburgh. It was one of those neighborhoods that still looked decent in the daytime, but you started noticing the cracks when you stayed out past dark. Abandoned homes, shady alleyways, and sirens in the distance more often than not. It was a weekend in spring. My parents were attending an out-of-town wedding and were staying overnight at the hotel. My older brother was working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour grocery store across town. That left me completely alone in the house for the night, which I didn't mind at all. I looked forward to it somewhat. I've always been more of a homebody. I had friends, dated occasionally, wasn't socially awkward or anything. I just enjoyed solitude. Being alone meant I could blast music, order trashy food, and fall asleep in the living room, watching whatever I wanted without judgment. That night, my plan was simple. Play some PS4 on the big living room TV, eat some wings, and re-watch a few episodes of Samurai Ghost Wars, an anime I was obsessed with back then. I even had my dog keeping me company. Rusty, a 10-year-old basset hound mix who had been with us since I was a kid. Rusty was a lazy, gentle old soul. He hardly ever barked, spent most of his days snoring on the couch, and was usually glued to my side if food was involved. He wasn't the type of dog you'd expect to leap into action, more like the type to whimper at thunderstorms. It was around 1 o'clock in the morning when I started dozing off. I'd finished the last of my wings and was curled up on the couch under a blanket, with Rusty curled up by my feet. The room was dark, except for the glow of the TV and a small kitchen light I'd left on behind me. That's when I heard the first bang. It came from the back alley that ran behind our house. A loud metallic thud that echoed through the silence. I paused the TV and sat up for a second, listening. Nothing followed. I shrugged it off. If you've ever lived near a city, you know random sounds are part of the background noise. Garbage bins tipping over, raccoons knocking things down, sometimes even drunk neighbors fumbling with the wrong house. But then Rusty lifted his head. He didn't just look alert. His ears perked up in a way I hadn't seen in years, and his body went rigid. A low growl started rumbling in his chest, which was incredibly rare for him. I muttered something like, "It's probably nothing," and gently rubbed his back. He relaxed a bit, and I went back to watching. 2 minutes later, another bang, louder this time, and followed by a slow, scraping sound. That's when Rusty bolted upright and sprinted to the basement door. He was barking, loud, aggressive, frenzied barking. Not the confused yips he used to let out when the mailman came, but full-on snarling and growling like a dog possessed. It startled me so much I jumped up, heart racing. I followed him to the hallway, and that's when I realized the sound was coming from inside our basement. More specifically, from the back door that led to the alleyway. It was an old metal door, barely used, that opened into a narrow space between the house and the neighbor's fence. It had always been stiff and rusted, so bad you had to shove your entire weight against it to get it open, even with the key. But someone was trying to get through it, persistently, deliberately. That door was being rammed, over and over, and it wasn't subtle. Whoever was down there wasn't just trying to open it. They were trying to break it in. Now I should have called the police. I really should have. But I was 17, young, dumb, and full of adrenaline. Instead of reaching for the phone, I ran up to my room and grabbed the wooden bat I kept under my bed. It wasn't for sports. It was for nights like this, when you needed to feel a little tougher than you were. With the bat in one hand and Rusty charging ahead of me, I crept down the basement stairs. Each thud of my feet echoed louder than I expected, like the whole house was holding its breath. About halfway down the steps, I heard something that froze me in place. A man's voice. Deep, close, calm. He said something like, "Oh," as if he'd been caught off guard by the barking, or maybe by hearing me approach. And then, silence. The banging stopped instantly. For a solid minute, I didn't move. Neither did Rusty. He was at the bottom of the stairs, growling so hard I thought he'd start foaming at the mouth. Eventually, I got the courage to peek through the narrow window that looked out over the basement door, but it was too dark. All I could see was the faint outline of the alley. Whoever had been there was gone. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat on the couch with the bat resting across my lap and the TV muted, listening for any sound. Rusty stayed curled up beside me, still on high alert. When my brother came home around 7 a.m., I told him what happened. He checked out the back door, gave it a pull, and it came right off the hinges. The psycho had almost gotten in. One more shove, and he would have been inside the house. But Rusty stopped him. I don't think people understand just how out of character that behavior was for my dog. Rusty wasn't brave. He didn't bark at strangers. He didn't run ever. It was like something switched in his brain that night, like he knew the door was about to give, and he had to act. A few years later, we had to put Rusty down. He'd grown weak, lost interest in food, and it was clear he was just tired. I got a few minutes alone with him before the injection. I didn't cry. I just leaned down and whispered, "Thank you." Because if Rusty hadn't been there that night, if he hadn't reacted the way he did, I might not be here today. I think about that a lot. That quiet old dog saved my life. When I was 13, I started sleeping in the downstairs guest room during big storms. I live in southern Kansas, right in the heart of Tornado Alley, and ever since I was little, heavy thunder made me uneasy. My dad understood, so he never minded when I camped out down there. One night in early spring, a pretty bad thunderstorm rolled through around midnight. It wasn't unusual. It happens a lot in our area. I was lying on the guest bed, watching YouTube with my earbuds in, the occasional flash of lightning lighting up the entire room like a camera flash. At around 12:40 a.m., I felt the floor faintly rumble beneath me. I took one earbud out and listened closely. That's when I heard it. A very specific, deep bass sound I recognized right away. It was my dad's old Ford Ranger. The muffler was rusted out, and the stereo had this obnoxiously loud subwoofer that you could hear from down the block. The sound rolled into the driveway and stopped. I figured he must have gotten off work early. He works long shifts at a meatpacking plant and was supposed to be home around 2 a.m., but it wasn't unheard of for him to finish early. So I picked up my blanket, unplugged my phone, and stood at the edge of the bed, waiting for him to come in through the garage, like he always did. But minutes passed, and I didn't hear the door open. No footsteps, nothing. That's when I got this weird gut feeling. I walked slowly over to the guest room window that looked out onto the driveway. It was one of those wide, clear, basement-level windows. Nothing obstructed the view, but there was no car, not even a shadow of one. The driveway was empty. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, trying to make sense of it. Had I just imagined the car sound? Maybe it was someone else's car passing by. But that didn't add up. The driveway is at the back of the house, far from the main road. I started pacing a little, convincing myself it was just the storm messing with my senses. I was about to sit back down when I heard something else. A cough. It came from inside the garage. Not just any cough. It was my dad's cough. Rough, deep, like he had something caught in his throat. I know that sounds better than I know my ringtone. That's when my stomach dropped. The garage door never opened. If my dad had come home, I would have heard the loud grind of the motor as the door opened. But I hadn't heard anything. I stood completely still. The only sound was the rain slamming against the roof and the windows, and thunder grumbling far off in the distance. I tried listening again, pressing my ear against the wall near the garage, but all I could hear was the storm and my heartbeat. Then came the voice, a calm, hushed voice from the top of the basement stairs. It said my name, clearly, slowly, almost gently. Liam. I froze. It wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. The storm, my thoughts, even my fear. I didn't know whether to run or scream. My whole body just locked up. I looked at my dog, a Labrador named Max, lying at the foot of the bed. He had been dead asleep, but he didn't even react to the voice. No barking, no growling, just this confused tilt of the head toward me, like he hadn't heard anything at all. At that point, I felt this deep, primal instinct to not respond. I didn't call back. I didn't move. I just sat on the bed, breathing slowly, waiting, hoping whoever or whatever was up there would leave me alone. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. At some point, I fell asleep without realizing it, probably out of exhaustion or fear. When I woke up, it was around 4 a.m. The storm had died down, and everything was quiet. I rushed to the window again, and this time, the Ford Ranger was there in the driveway, covered in rain, engine still warm. I bolted upstairs and found my dad in the kitchen, making coffee like nothing had happened. I told him everything. The sound of his truck, the cough in the garage, the voice was calling my name. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't home until a few minutes before I woke up. And the truck? He said he drove straight in. No stops, no sitting in the driveway. As for the cough, he swore he hadn't been near the garage at all before coming in through the front door. It still bothers me. I've never been a big believer in ghosts, and I always try to rationalize things. But something about that night didn't make sense. Something mimicked my dad's car. Something mimicked his voice, and it wanted me to come upstairs. I've never slept in that guest room again. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I had gone up those stairs, and who or what was waiting for me at the top. When I was a kid, our family lived in a large house. It wasn't fancy or anything, just bigger than average, with more rooms than we needed. On the first floor, tucked away toward the back of the house, was a weird little space we called the second living room. It had a worn-out recliner, a small table, and an old couch we rarely used. Honestly, no one in my family went in there unless we were cleaning or storing something. It always felt oddly cold and unused. One morning, when I was maybe 12 or 13, I woke up feeling sick. I told my mom, and she let me stay home from school. Both my parents had work that day, and my siblings were already out the door, so I had the house completely to myself. Around 10:30 a.m., I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I heard footsteps downstairs. It was subtle at first, slow and steady, but clear enough to snap my attention. At first, I thought nothing of it. My mom would sometimes leave late for work, so I figured it was just her. Feeling a little hungry, I got up and headed downstairs toward the kitchen. That's when everything turned upside down. As I rounded the corner and stepped into the kitchen doorway, I froze. Standing there, just a few feet in front of me, was a man. He had to be at least 6 feet tall, wearing dirty, torn-up clothes and no shoes. His hair was wild, his face pale and blank. He didn't move. He didn't say a word. He just stared at me, and I stared back. It was probably only a few seconds, but it felt like forever. My body wouldn't move. I couldn't speak. Then, as if something finally clicked in my brain, I turned and sprinted back upstairs to my room. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and pushed my dresser in front of it. My heart was pounding so loud, I couldn't hear anything else. Instead of calling the police like I should have, I called my mom first. I was screaming, telling her there was a man in the house. She told me to stay locked in the room and immediately call 911, so I did. 15 of the longest minutes of my life passed before I saw a couple of police officers pulling into the driveway from my bedroom window. As soon as they entered the house, I bolted from my room and ran down to meet them. I explained everything, what I saw, where he was standing, and how he didn't say a word. The police searched the house from top to bottom. Nothing. No broken windows, no forced entry, and no sign of the man. Eventually, my parents came home, completely freaked out and frustrated that no one had been caught. Just as one of the last officers was about to leave, he paused and looked toward the second living room, the one we never used. Something caught his eye, a Walmart bag sticking out from under the old couch. What they found under that couch still gives me the chills. There were dozens of trash bags, half-eaten and rotting food, empty water bottles, baby wipes, and even a full bag of urine. Some of our missing household items were in there too, things we'd assumed we just misplaced. That man had been living under our couch for weeks. He had somehow managed to hide in that cramped space without making a sound, without being noticed, and without leaving any trace, until the moment he decided to reveal himself. To this day, I don't understand how none of us smelled anything coming from that room. It didn't even feel real. He had been right beneath us, living with us the entire time. After that, we completely cleared out that room and replaced all the furniture with hard wooden chairs and a breakfast table. No more couches, no more places to hide. I'm heading off to college soon, and I'm glad I won't have to sleep under that same roof much longer. But every time I wake up sick or hear the slightest noise downstairs, I remember those blank eyes watching me from my kitchen, and I wonder, how many nights did he crawl out of that couch while we were asleep?